So I think we lost all of our rationalists in the class, because there's nothing to say if someone says, well, I just don't believe that those experiences need to be privileged in that way. And I don't know what to do with engaging in a discussion with someone who says, if you haven't had this experience, or if you don't believe in the nature of this experience, there's no appeal and to an argument. Or, he can talk, he can explain, he can elicit, he can try to persuade on some level. But ultimately, if someone says someone has a vision that the whole universe is connected by energy, then I'm just fine saying that they had neurons that misfired, or they took a drug, or they have a neurophysiological issue. And so, you're right, there's nothing Heschel can do to say any different than he can say, well, then love is a neurophysiological issue. And of course, we do say that. We say that mammals are connected to their mothers because they suckle, and there's oxytocin, and there's all this bonding that happens. So Heschel's not denying that there are physical causal things involved. He doesn't deny that, like you could have a subconscious and things emerge from the subconscious, but he wants to say something a little different about them. And my best explanation of, which is really bad picture, he wants you to adopt something like a holistic view. What I mean by holistic is, if this is the universe, and just to make it more godlike, I'm going to put a head on it. We'll say this is God trying to contact you, and let's just pretend God has little feet, maybe little arms, just to make it a little bit more anthropomorphic. And the universe is very, very big. And you're in the universe. Then for you to talk about your relationship to the universe is not to talk about something that is outside you. So imagine that you are an organelle in a cell in a human body. What is your relationship to the body completely? Or what is your relationship to the body? It's not as something apart from the body that has a relationship like I would have with my mother, let's say. We're two separate beings and there's something in between. It's rather that you're asking, what is your relationship as a part to the whole? As if you were a little organelle and you said, I'm not sure I believe there really is a body, because my only experience is that of this cell that I live in with the other organelles. No one could convince you that there's a larger body, but the truth is you're part of a larger thing. And that larger thing is what Heschel would call God. But to you, it's ineffable, because even though we can scientifically learn, that little organelle may learn things like, wait a second, I think we're part of something larger, and we can talk about that, like physicists today talk about something larger than ourselves. What would it be like if we had unifying laws? But nevertheless, Heschel is saying, imagine the whole network of causes and effects that go on in a body. All right, so let's say that little cell says, well, some people believe that there's a body, some people believe there isn't, but at the very least, I know that what caused let's say you're a mitochondria, what caused my ability to produce some energy was that some glucose or something was delivered to me that I could use to power up the cell, right? So Heschel's not denying that you can do a causal network, but just going back from one effect to one cause is really linear, and that's what we always want to say about God. But the truth is, there are so many interlinks. You're part of a system, and the system is working right through you, and it's working within itself. You're in a pool of causes and effects. The body is like a pool of causes and effects. Why is this important? Because if the prophet gets an insight, the prophet's sitting there and the prophet's like, defined by Heschel, I am someone who is feeling what God feels and puts it into words. You're in the midst of this whole universe, and you're feeling like, and it's not just this abstract universe. It's a universe that does include, what's happening in Gaza, and what's happening in Israel, and what's happening in Darfur, and it's also what's happening in my family, and what's happening in Ann Arbor, and what's happening down the street. All of that is part of the universe. millions, billions of causes and effects going on simultaneously like a body. But then you realize that you're really part of a system. So if something in your body, your liver did that, is because something in your pituitary was excreted. So I have an effect and I have a cause. But when you realize you're part of a body, you realize the entire endocrine system is sending messages all of the time. And then if you add in your other brain, which is in your gut, to your brain up here, and you start counting in more and more causes and effects that are happening simultaneously, it's like you're in a sea of causes and effects. That's what we mean by system. So Heschel says, if out of this emerges a prophetic insight, like, wait a second, we need Shabbat, or we need to welcome the stranger, or we need a system without a king, that these insights, you could say, well, that was only because, as came up last time, when Moses was little, he dreamed of being a king, and it was in his subconscious. And so I can trace it right back to that. I can trace it back to a few causes and effects. But what really Heschel's trying to say is that when you realize you're part of millions of interconnecting causes and effects, it doesn't explain it to go back one step or one cause. There are lots of causes. There are lots of things going along. So what he says is that he's interested in sudden events. So this concept of event is very important to him, which is what does it mean to have an event that is super significant in your life, and it doesn't seem to explain it to just give one cause for it, right? Because if you really want to get deep into it, there are lots of simultaneous things going on, and they could all be intersecting. So what he wants to say is, I'm not interested that you said that this was caused by, I don't know, one thing, one memory that happened in your childhood that's now being triggered. Rather, it's like you're seeing things holistically, that my insight is coming from everything. It's coming from, I mean, everything's interconnected. It's coming from my childhood. It's coming from my present. It's coming from things that are happening across town. It's happening from the zeitgeist that is happening right now in the world. It's basically like I'm inside the body of God. And I'm like, wait, there's a sudden event. So he wants you to be able to look at events that are monumental without just saying, I can tell you the cause of that. Just coming up with one cause for that effect, he says, you're really just oversimplifying it. It's just that simple. You're seeing it as something outside of you that caused you, rather than you're inside the pond and you're inside this holistic system. So as I've said before, if anybody really wants to study theology, instead of reading books on Jewish theology, I would really just read books on systems theory. How do you distinguish between an insight that is significant and an insight that is rubbish? I agree, but I don't think he gives super clear criteria about it. But this is what I think he says. Remember, I told you there are three philosophical theories that underpin his philosophy. Religious sentiment being what leads to religion, not abstraction or causal theories or rationality. Number two was phenomenology, which is just that it's okay to talk about human experience without always trying to unmask it by showing the Wizard of Oz who's behind the curtain. Like, instead of, and I've said that you can do that with anything. That phenomenology is like, let experience be important. Let me do it this way. Maybe what we're doing at synagogue, according to Heschel, is, and we're trying to work as a community to share what it means to be human. That's phenomenology. And so sermons should be about, what is it like to grow old? What is it like to have boundaries with people? You want to have proper boundaries, but you want to let them in, but you don't want to let them in so far. When do you know? By the way, these are the kinds of sermons that I give. How do you balance, as a human being, how do we balance the fact that we have to pay attention to the day to day? But if all we pay attention is the day and day, when we get to the end of our lives, we've had no sense of the horizon of the eternal. And so phenomenology is basically saying, the humanities are really supposed to be about talking about what it's like to live and share wisdom, instead of, well, I can explain that. I can explain that it is just your perception of time that leads you into this or that. It's like, Yeah, I know we have perceptions of time. That's why I gave a whole lesson on teenagers, because teenagers just can't get the fact that someday they're going to have deep experiences that lead them into purposes. They always just want to argue it's just this or it's just that. Life is just a random bunch of molecules banging into each other. There is no God. To which I might say, scientists have spent a long time trying to bang those same molecules into each other, and life doesn't form. It doesn't mean anything, right? I mean, like they want to make sure everything is just explained, that you have wonder for. But someone had their hand. Go ahead. Go.
So, to me, it's a beautiful philosophy of distinction between cause and what I would think of as and purpose.
Right.
The question I have is, okay, now I got that, but why Jewish?
So
why Jewish? Why not Unitarian? Why not something else? Because it's universal. What he's articulating
is very universal.
Yeah.
So I should say the third philosophical principle is pragmatism. Rather than try to explain these kinds of what it's like to be human being experiences in our lives, love, death, existential awe, dread, trauma, rather than trying to explain all of it, ask yourself whether the theories or ideas generated are actually fruitful and effective. They're pragmatically helpful. So, we do it all the time, frankly. I mean, I know that just to do with a different religion, right? Someone says to me, well, the Catholic Church it preaches love and acceptance and inclusion. And has it really? Like, let's look at the consequences of it, right? So a pragmatist would be like, I know in theory it looks fantastic, but then why does everybody go to hell that, won't join the cult? So, and I just mean we do it all the time by looking. So Heschel, I think, would say about and he was influenced by Dewey, I think, in the Columbia JTS area, is if an event happened in the life in history, there's an event that happens in history, and it eliminated slavery. It actually was like, oh my God, one person cannot own another person. That's nuts. And that prophet was able to somehow put that into words that then translated into law and into a way of people act. And then people could embody it to try to be a light unto the nations to other people. Then Heschel would say, pragmatically, that was huge. Now, if I say, my big insight is that there's nothing more profound than the cockroach. I mean, they survive nuclear blasts, and have you ever seen, they're beautiful. I have awe of the cockroach. And it doesn't really lead to any major revolution in humanity or God's purposes. Then most people who feel what God feels would probably be like, I wouldn't say that was an event worthy of calling a prophetic moment. So he does want to look at things by their events, and it comes up in his aesthetic stuff, which is, I mentioned at the end of last time, which is, why not say Picasso, or let's take someone less controversial. I mean, I like Lucian Freud. Why not a painting by Lucian Freud is profound and it's inspired, and they're like, it came to me and I did it. It's inspiration, because the concept of inspiration is a big thing of what he's saying. He's saying the Bible is inspired. He's not saying it was dictated. So you could say, well, artists are inspired, but his attitude is, did Lucian Freud's paintings change the world? Do they teach you a pattern for living that recreates some kind of prophetic message of how to live? And and the answer is probably like, the practical effect of it didn't produce that. He's happy to leave religion as a category. He's like, is there artistic inspiration? Of course there is. That's just artistic. It's not religion. He's happy to keep to his category. He's like, I'm talking about religious inspiration. Religious inspirations are holistic and they come with content. So this is from a documentary made, I don't know, 20 years ago, called For All Mankind. And the entire documentary is nothing but astronauts speaking in their own words. So the part I skipped was the blast off into outer space, which is a lot of fun to watch. So the astronauts are finally getting to space. It's from several Apollo missions. And they look out the window, and let's hear a little bit of their language. It's like, I don't think of countries and he has this kind of moment where what does he say the three things are that people, green trees, and fresh water. actually did this for a presentation in Las Vegas to a group that had families of astronauts. And they told me that what I'm saying is half right and half wrong, which is that they said engineers on the missions tended not to have any moments of awe, but regular pilots who went on the missions, there are all these quotes where they come back, it's changed the way they view the world, right? They see the world in terms of fresh water. There's nothing more important than fresh water. We need to be talking about the fresh water, like fresh water, green trees, and no borders. We should be looking at, forget these maps that they use in schools where everything is aligned north, south, east, west. We should be spinning them and taking the lines off of them. So tremendous sense of gratitude, like you don't realize what you got. Like,
why? Besides that, it is blue. Across the ocean, watch it turn, and there's no pulling it up. It's moving in a blackness that is almost beyond conception.
now you gotta remember, these are pilots. These are good old boys who are in the Air Force and live in Texas.
Black. But I was in sunlight and I was able to look at it black. What are you looking at? Oh, the universe, but it's the infinity of space, infinity of time. I'm looking at something called space that had no end. And it's time.
Yeah.
That has no meaning.
I mean, literally, it's the name of God in Kabbalah, Ein Sof. There's no end. So what's one of the 7 holy names of God that you can't write down on a piece of paper or you have to put in Geniza is Adonai Tzvaot, which means Lord of the stars.
Sit back and really appreciate what an amazing adventure this was. But only during those little periods of time when you had to stop and do things you weren't programmed. A lot of times when there was nothing else to do after everybody going to sleep, you couldn't look around. One thing you ever see, you guys want to have a huge winter. Looking back at yours was past time, I never would have tired of.
Who we got up now?
Biomedical data recently was monitored and the DMC was soundly asleep while the commander was resting, but perhaps not soundly asleep.
You got the black watch working here tonight. Out there in this little family, see the risk because you realize that if the class breaks, the computers wouldn't work, the electrical system wouldn't work, and you're not going to get back. You have time to contemplate, you have time to think about
Right.
it, you have time to
Absolute dependence connected to a sense of your own mortality. So I'm going to pause it for a second. If you watch the whole thing, this is what you would find. These pilots keep going back to this language. They want to sit and stare at the earth. They want to talk about it. They want to talk about it's God, it's so beautiful. It's so beautiful. Just like Heschel talks about the experience of beauty, grandeur leading to awe. They talk about, we got to cherish this. We don't really, do you realize this? So what happens on Houston, they don't like this. They feel like the astronauts are straying. So they give them tons of routine tasks. I want you to read from the machine. So they're trying to get them out of thinking in this way. So one of the things he's like, look, when I finally get a chance, when I'm not doing all the things Houston, but if you actually look, Houston's trying to control them because Houston doesn't really need this information. They're already getting the information transmitted. So and then sometimes they get giddy, the astronauts, because they want to play. And then, and they're like, we need you to stop playing. And so let's see if I do a little more. Give you the next one. I think that's enough. Wait, oh, I'm sorry. There you go.
And you didn't really feel like you were out there.
It's the experience of wilderness. It's the dream he has there. It's a really good movie. I mean, I actually, this is an edited thing. I edited it down on my computer. Yeah, yeah, it's I was streaming it on Hulu. I mean, I could keep going. It's really cool. Yeah. Heschel says, you can have an experience of great beauty, but it would only be called radical amazement or even awe if it's sending you a message to change your practice, right? And but he also wants to admit that many people would not change their practice, right? So that they would fight the insight or just dismiss it. So that faith is actually faith to the insights, because you don't have to have faith. You can, I mean, this is probably a terrible example, but the person who is taken out hunting and kills something and says, I'm never doing this again. Like, I don't care. And dad's saying, oh, come on, you know, everyone feels that way the first time, get over it, blah, 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 blah. People try to get us to overcome some of our moments where we feel very, very strongly about something, and it can be very effective because it really takes faith to do it. But then even if, so you need that connection to say, I'm really gonna do this. I mean, he is saying the life of a prophet, someone who is really channeling the whole, and he doesn't want to use that word for many people, is extremely lonely. The life of the prophet is no one's listening. The prophet's desperate to put things into words. I mean, he's like, it's like the lover who keeps writing letters to his beloved or her beloved, right? That's why they write the letters, which is, I can't stop writing you as I'm falling in love, because this love thing's making me try to put things to words, but it's also inadequate. But now I'm going to write another one. Like, you know, he's like, the personal experience is all desperate to put it into words. They're not looking for, according to Heschel, you are not looking for some kind of emptiness inside and peace. You are, like, the Jewish thing is not, I'm looking for mere peace in my heart. You're looking to proselytize. You're looking to get out there and change minds and hearts, and you're desperate to talk about it. You don't want to say, yeah, you know, I don't want to talk. Maybe you don't want to talk about trauma, but you do want to talk about awe. I mean, so that you're desperate to find other people that think like you, or to try to build that. And a prophet, he kind of says, is, I forget the quote, but I'm thinking of Spinal Tap, unfortunately, which is, you know, the prophet turns everything up to 11. Heschel has a quote himself that's like that. They're frying their brains. They are so in pain that people are allowing these things to happen, and so they're unhappy and desperate. And so I'm just saying that he's like, so you definitely want to put into words, you want to get other people to follow you. And then the big question, though, is why be Jewish? To summarize, the power of religious truth is a moment in sight, and its content is oneness or love. You're this organelle in this body, and the body is God. And you're like, I don't know if it's really a body, but I'm part of something larger. I don't know what it's thinking, but I feel like what it's feeling. Like maybe there's a cell in your body that can feel like this body is not happy. This body is unhealthy. This body is out of whack, whatever it is. But you perceive this ineffable contact that you feel as one of love, and a transcendence to get there. How can we be sure that one, and then he relates this to the Shema, it's oneness. How can we be sure that oneness is really a way of God? How do we presume to know what is beyond the mystery? The certainty of being exposed to a presence not of the world is a fact of human existence, but such certainty does not find its fulfillment in contemplation. It is a stir with the demand to live in a way that is worthy of that presence. So you feel called, and it has a demand or more. The beginning of faith is, as I said above, not a feeling for the mystery of living or a sense of awe, wonder, and amazement. The root of religion is the question of what to do with the feeling for the mystery of living, what to do with awe, wonder, and amazement. Religion begins with a consciousness that something is asked of us. It is, in that sense, eternal asking in which the soul is caught and in which the human's answer is elicited. Let's turn it over so we get a little bit more under our belt. This continues. Something's asked of us, but what's being asked of us? The ultimate question that stirs our soul is anonymous, mysterious, powerful, yet ineffable. Who will put into words? Who will teach us the way of God? How shall we know that the way we choose is the way he wants us to pursue? In moments of insight, we are called to return, tshuva. But how does one make tshuva? What is the way to walk on the way with God? We all sense the grandeur and the mystery, but who will tell us how to answer the mystery? Who will tell us how to live in a way that's compatible with the grandeur, the mystery, and the glory? All we have is a perception that neither words nor deeds in which to phrase or to form an answer. We do not live by insight alone. A person is in need of a creed, of a dogma, of expression, of a way of living. Insights are not a secure possession. They are vague and they are sporadic. They are like divine sparks flashing up before us and becoming obscure again. And we fall back into a darkness almost as black as that in which we were before. The problem is how to communicate those rare moments to all hours of our life, how to commit intuition to concepts, the ineffable to words, insight to rational understanding, how to convey our insights to others and to unite in a fellowship of faith. Moments of insight are not experienced with sufficient intensity by everybody. Those sparks are powerful enough to light up a soul, but not to illumine the world. Has God never said, let there be light for all the world to see? In moments of insight, God addresses himself to a single soul, never addressed a world, a people, or a community. Has he left himself without a trace in history for those who do not have the strength to see him constantly? So he's moving in this moment toward, first of all, okay, I've had a couple of insights. If you think you have insights a lot, you probably don't. They're probably not what he's talking about. And they flee, so, okay, I had an experience of grandeur in the Adirondacks when I was a certain age, right? An experience when I was another age of having a moment, as Aldous Huxley says in Doors of Perception, of looking at things through the lens of the infinite. Of course, Huxley is using psychedelics, but like, it doesn't mean the perceptions are different. In other words, Huxley's not saying, Ruth here just turned into a giant unicorn. That's not what Huxley says. Huxley's saying, a little bit like the astronauts, what it means to see things through the lens of the infinite is for me to say, I am not that different from Sarah, Rebecca, Rachel, Leah, and Abraham, Yaakov, and Yitzhak. It's a way of saying, oh my God, we think we stand on top of the world. We think we are the culmination of progress. We think this and that. And I am not sure I don't have more in common with people who lived thousands of years ago. And they were desperate to convey their insights about life to me. And so, for example, when he's talking about this fellowship, let me try to give you an example. We have been given from our ancestors this gift, or you could say it's because of nature. I don't care. Again, I don't care. Somehow we have this gift of marriage. And I'm not saying everyone's married or happily married or anything like that. I'm saying it is a ritual institution, okay? Now, when I fell in love with Lynn, I'm like, this is great, but I don't know how to put it, you put it into words. What does it mean? How does it come into action? And my ancestors said, you know what? You know when you see two birds and they're kind of like watching over each other and taking care of each other? That's going to be you and Lynn. And then we're going to have this thing, and it's a ritual, and it's called Kiddushin, and it involves this, and it involves that, and it involves commitment. And not only that, we're going to bestow on you this concept of covenant. And so what's a covenant? Covenant's pretty complicated. Covenant is, how do you stay in a relationship with someone who's changing and you're changing? Or do you just say, you know what, we're moving, like, let's just stay together until we don't feel like it anymore. Nope. Don't do, I mean, divorce is perfectly fine, Judaism, but don't do, yeah, well, I'm not feeling it next week, so let's break up. So the institution of marriage and all of the rituals that go with it, which I teach in my 6th and 7th grade class, I think it's one of the highest priorities to teach, is so they know what Jewish life cycle events look like, or mourning customs, right? Yeah, it's going to be bad when a parent dies or anyone dies. And we've given this Shiva and Shloshim and how it works and what you do. And you know what? You can drink alcohol up until the moment of the burial, because if that's what you need to do to get through burying your dead, you can do it. But once you're dead or buried, you can't drink for at least 7, if not 30 days, because you're just going to be drowning out your brain and numbing yourself, and you got to feel it, and you don't want to talk about it, but you kind of have to talk about it. But you can go to the bedroom and lock yourself in the bedroom during Shiva if that's what you need to do, but you can't tell everyone to go home because they have a right to be out there waiting for that moment you're to come out and be like, okay, I'll answer the rabbi's question. How am I like my dad? Okay, I just needed an hour not, so everyone says, don't worry, we ate all the corned beef sandwiches. So like, you are given these rituals and structures and institutions to help you. Because if not, it's not going to lead to anything. And then the prophetic but I want to get to that concept of history. The prophet, and he's not, I mean, maybe Martin Luther King was a prophet, but prophets are not running all over the place. His attitude is, he's perfectly happy, I think, teaching a world religions course where he tells you what their prophets say. This is Moses. This is Buddha, right? Buddha couldn't stand the fact that, he said the worst thing in life is a diseased person, an old person, thanks Buddha, and a dead person. So his insight was, I'm going to teach you how to detach from the anxiety over sickness, age, and death. And so his teachings come to a way to live where you don't have attachment. And I think Heschel will be happy to say that he had this relationship. Maybe it sounds a little bit fearful, but we all have it. And he gave tools to address it. Then you pick up a Moses. What's a Moses? Well, what do we know about Moses? Well, it's pretty simple. Number one, he was raised by women, right? He was raised by his sister and his mom and Pharaoh's daughter and the handmaidens of all different cultures. He was not raised in a traditional household. He went out, he knew he was a Hebrew, and then found out they were enslaved when he was a teenager, or a young teenager, which is about when we have formative experiences in our lives that generally determine our values. Then he thinks, okay, now I get it. Egyptians are evil, Hebrews are good. And then he sees one Hebrew kill another Hebrew. And he's like, great, my logical thought just failed, because now Jews can be as bad as terrible. So then he's like, I will just go to Midian. And then he sees boys taking advantage of girls and not letting them water their flocks. And then he chases them away. He's driven by a concept of injustice. And that is floating through him. And somehow he is a prophet for this new legislation. Kings are evil, women get rights, welcome the stranger. And so he is a prophet, as Heschel says. Of course, when they're putting things into words, they're going to use their experiences and their past. And if you want to call it the subconscious, I don't care if it's the subconscious or it's the conscious. They're trying to find ways of convey their things. So he would just say, you're a Jew. If you see that, I mean, those insights are so powerful. And yes, did we not get rid of slavery? We didn't quite get rid of slavery, but I think Maimonides has the best explanation, because he wasn't a stupid person, which is Maimonides' argument, along with other rabbis and commentators, is if someone stood up and said, guess what? Slavery is wrong. No one do slavery, they would have been dismissed. If I stand up and I tell all of you to be vegan, I mean, heck, I lost 2/3 of the class just talking about Heschel. I'll lose more if I say you're a bad Jew if you don't go vegan, like in the Garden of Eden. So you got to figure out, how do I help people? So what the Bible basically does is it gets rid of many forms of slavery, but not indentured servitude, which, and in many, but it also limits it. Like, most forms, not all, of indentured servitude last a maximum of 6 years. And then the person is sent away with money and to start their life. And if they want to stay, they basically get the rights of a member of the family, right? They get the awl in their ear and they wear an earring, and they have rights of extended family and to raise their own families. It's really different. So so the prophet, it's like this. So Heschel's view is, in the world that existed, and this Jewish revelation was shared. And is it dictation from Sinai? No. God doesn't communicate in dictation. And the problem with the Orthodox today, and I'm happy to say that, I know it rubs people wrong, is they've lost a sense of mystery. When I talk to the rabbis, they're always like, well, of course it was on Mount Sinai and God spoke from it. So in other words, where's the mystery? It's all just they're replacing a mechanical view with another mechanical view. This kind of thing happens in Kabbalah when I taught the Kabbalah course here. Kabbalah is a form of mysticism that's trying to put into words the fact that we live within a much bigger set of causes and effects than we tend to think, because our mind likes to reduce things to one thing. So there's more going on in this room than just me talking. There's a lot more going on. But some of the Kabbalists, especially in the Zohar, say, let's map the whole thing out. So they come up with a map that's like simpler than a map of Ann Arbor. And they're like, so it's this. And so if it's Tuesday, you're over there. And if it's this. And so it's what the Orthodox do today with Sinai, which is, of course, it's the voice that came out of the sky. It was like a megaphone. You don't believe in megaphones? God can't have a megaphone. But then I'm like, so does God have a voice? Well, I guess God did have a voice. So is it like a human voice? Of course it's like, well, it's not like a human voice. It's a God voice, but it's a human voice too. Because if I say that this was inspiration coming out of Moses over a period of time, others, because there can be other prophets. And that's enough for me. And they're like, that's why you're conservative Reformed Jew. You don't really believe in God, right? Because you can't believe in the ineffable. So Heschel's like, he is, hell yeah, a conservative Jew. But what he wants to say is, you are part of a tradition that has these insights. Would you really stay a Jew if you learned insights and you're like, that's just not me? Like, I don't care about this stuff. I don't know. I think about that a lot. I think if I was born Catholic, would I be a priest? Well, I know I wouldn't be a priest. If I was born Protestant, would I be a minister? Okay. I think about that. I think I'd probably be a great Unitarian. So you thought I'd never go back to your question. I think I'd probably be Unitarian or Episcopalian or whatever I was born into. So do those thoughts haunt me? Of course they haunt me. But I'm so grateful to be born a Jew. So Heschel's like, is that okay that you say, I am part of the tradition whose prophetic insights by these powerful feelers of God, I actually agree with? I mean, when we read that Haftarah on Yom Kippur, right? Is this the fast I desire? When there are people starving, when you just cheated on your taxes, when you have ill weights and measures, you think that I'm going to be impressed by everyone singing Kol Nidre together? Forget it. That's brilliant stuff. But then for those people who say, I love the prophets because they don't like ritual, I like the Kabbalists because they're about feeling, the Kabbalists would be like, oh my God, when you ate that one non-kosher piece of food, you killed a part of God, right? You think it doesn't matter? You think ritual doesn't matter? And also, by the way, when Amos says in Isaiah, he's not saying go have something to eat and feed the poor. He's saying, I want your fast too. The fasts are important. So Heschel is saying that the prophets have produced these insights, and you don't have to have any moments of awe to really be like, I'm a Jew, this is what we stand for. But what he's saying is, what is beneath it is God. What is beneath the Jewish tradition really is God's communications to this world. Can I prove it? You can read other things. I mean, I can see that people have. So here, if we look at this, that was what I was trying to get to here. Now, halakha, only insights and nothing else. In thinking about the world, we cannot proceed without guidance supplied. In thinking about the living God, we must look to the prophets for guidance. Those who share in the heritage of Israel believe that God is not. Oh, I cut it off there for the quote. You share in the heritage of Israel. Let's leave it at that. Bless you. Next page. This is from Man is Not Alone. With quiet sadness and rich with strenuous lessons of defeat, we learn today to understand that there are no extemporaneous solutions to perpetual problems. right? That the only safeguard against constant danger is constant vigilance, constant guidance. Such guidance, such vigilance is given to him who lives in the shadows of Sinai, whose weeks, days, hours are set in the rhythm of the Torah. What constitutes the Jewish form of living is not so much the performance of single good deeds, the taking of a step now and then, as the pursuit of a way, being on the way. Not so much the task of fulfilling as the state of being committed to the tasks, of belonging to an order in which single deeds, aggregates of religious feelings, sporadic sentiments, moral episodes become parts of a complete pattern. So if it's very easy for these sparks to dissipate, but they're telling you, wait a second, the world wants to be different. The world doesn't want to be nuclear holocaust and cockroaches. I mean, like the world doesn't want, Donald Trump. I mean, like this is not what God is wanting. So then you have to, what the tradition has, what the prophets and the tradition through halakha said is there's a pattern in which we invite you into observance, whether it's the laws of mourning, the model of marriage and what that ritual means, Shabbat, kashrut. There's no moment in your life that's not significant. Does every moment equally significant? Maybe not, but without stepping, except for this. The whole point of covenant is that the only way to really change the world is over generations past you. So the only real change to the world cannot be done in one lifetime. Of course, it's Rabbi Tarfon and Pirkei Avot. You don't have to finish the task, but you got to do your part. But the thing I don't like about that quote is the whole idea is the task is multi-generational. So we're not going to do climate change in one thing. What Judaism kind of invented or agrees with other religions is how can you be part of a program of change for the earth? And that will take generations and generations and generations. So you are inheriting a way of living that includes everything from reminders to goals, to teloses, to values, but it practices that are trying to wake you up to be part of a project with these big goals that will not be, how do you receive a task from the last generation and hand it forward and do your part with it? So let's go to the last page. The unheroic that is such a summary. So the thing is this, we are a religion of finding the holy in the ordinary. And Havdalah means separation between holy and ordinary. The word chol does profane is a terrible word. It's a stupid academic word. It means, the word chol means ordinary. So we're supposed to find the holy in the ordinary. Now he spends a lot of time in the other reading I gave you from Alone on the first day, the big packet. We are not like, enjoy life and have all of what it has to offer, gorge yourself on the sweets, enjoy the pleasures, because that's extravagance. He's also against asceticism, the idea that you should avoid the joys of life. So he's very much a middle way guy, because the middle way helps you enjoy the beauty of the ordinary without expecting it to be better than it is, but also not reducing it to what it looks like, to see the absolute humanity in everybody, not without turning everybody into a frigging saint. You know what I mean? Like, not overdoing it. So halakha trains you in a way to value time, value the ordinary, and in a way to value the unheroic. People think freedom is they get to decide what they're going to do today. They get to decide what they're going to do on Shabbat. They get to decide this. Heschel says, and it's in some of the other quotes from the packet as well, which is that, really, are you that free? You're not influenced by, Netflix just hooked me on Love Island, and I don't know why. You're not influenced by all of the messages of society, which are highly materialistic. You're not addicted to your phone. His attitude is, what do you think you're using your freedom for? And I got into this conversation at a bat mitzvah party on Saturday night with an Israeli who came to the bat mitzvah that happened Saturday afternoon. And it's like, for me, Shabbat is whatever I want to do. And if I want to do this, I do this. And if I want to do that, I do that. And I just sit there thinking of Heschel. It's like, are you finding holy in the ordinary? Are you just, I mean, how is that different than a regular day? Well, I don't have to go to work, but like he's like, you know, he wants you to listen to the call of the fact that this religion is really based in prophetic insight and in your own sense of the fact that we are part of God and that God is moving through you. Like God's in you as much as God's outside of you. There's no distinction. That you're living in the pond of God, and that this pond has an intention for for its future, and the future of the planet that is a part of it. And so this idea that you're free because you get to decide, he's like, no, you need to submit to a spiritual regimen, spiritual structures and disciplines. He's a big fan of spiritual discipline. So if you say to Heschel, does God really care if I eat this piece of shrimp? Heschel may say, that's the wrong question. It's like, what do you think that you're doing when you're eating that piece of shrimp? Like why are you so resistant to adopting kind of spiritual regimen? My wife is trying to get me to exercise and eat better, right? And she has absolutely hundreds of pages of research and articles that she keeps reading to me out loud, that this is the crucial moment of our lives, whether we look like old people in 15 years or whether we look like young people in 15 years. So, like she's right. So like when I say, no, I'm not going to take a walk with you, instead I'm going to answer one of the hundreds of emails that are waiting for me, am I really acting out of freedom? Like, why are we so resistant to adopting spiritual disciplines? And then we'll talk about the Sabbath probably next time. I have a copy on PDF linked on the website now, on our webpage. Trying to teach us the value of moments of time, the spiritual discipline of not trying to modify the earth for 25 hours a week, not trying to modify it. So you can appreciate absolute dependence. So you can find holiness in moments. So his attitude is, of course, we have a spiritual discipline, and it's called halakha. It's a way of living. It gives you a common language. And a lot of those things did come out of things. So when people say, I've told you before, I'm a big believer in it because I don't eat meat. Why not meat and milk? I always get asked this question in conversion class and by the teenagers and the religious school students. Yes, I think it's absolutely rooted in the fact that we were shepherds who lived off of goats and sheep. And the main thing we lived off was the milk that they made for their young, because we only culled the herd through a sacrificial offering, which was shared with pieces left on the altar. Absolutely, we recognize the maternal bond between we should not be having nourishment made for children with the body of the mother. And that developed into a halachic thing that now people make fun of, right? So he's like, absolutely, halakha has its roots as a spiritual discipline that has purposes and roots and binds you together as a community. But next time, we will look at your question, which is, what happens when your personal insights do not align with halakha? And it's going to be great. And that we're going to break. I have 3 texts to study and to come up with your own answers about. So thanks for coming.